One of my very good friends got married a few years ago, and I gave a speech. And at this speech, he was a friend of mine, SEAL, and at this speech, I was talking about what it was to be a man and when I felt like I was a man. And I said there was three things that I felt let me transition from being, mentally insecure about who I was as a person to being, okay, I'm actually good with who I am. Number one was learning how to fight. Mm-hmm. And, I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, and I learned how to fight. And now, all of a sudden, when I looked at other people, I wasn't posturing. I wasn't trying to pretend that I was tough. I knew that most people that I would encounter, I could defeat in a physical altercation. That was number one. Number two was going into combat. Because even though you might be tough in a street fight or in a fist fight with someone, when you're facing death, well, that's a whole nother level. And for me, going into combat, well, what was I going to act like? Was I going to be scared? Was I going to be a coward? Was I going to be scared of death? And when I went into combat, I wasn't. I was fine. I was okay with the fact that I could die, and I was okay with that. And I made good decisions and did what I was supposed to do. And the last one was I got married and had kids. Because all of a sudden, all these things, these being aggressive and working to fight and be able to destroy in an efficient way, well, then I took that and combined it with, okay, now I'm going to take care of my wife and our children, and that's what I'm going to do. And my point in giving this speech was he was a guy that had learned how to fight. He was a guy that had been in combat, and now there was one more step to take, which was, okay, now you're going to get married and you're going to take care of these people. So it's interesting that once again, that dichotomy that you talk about, it fits perfectly into the way I figured things out as a guy that went to high school and joined the military. It's kind of crazy, but it reinforces what you always say, which is that there's deeper meaning. There's a reason why I'm thinking that, and the reason is because of the things that you talk about and the way these things are overlaid throughout history for human beings to have gotten to this point.
Yeah, well, you acted it out, which is what you're supposed to do, and it's better to act it out and to understand it. That's best. It's better to understand it and not act it out than to not understand it at all. But the best is to act it out and understand it. And because then you can, then the way that you represent the world and yourself is in accordance with the way that you act, and that's optimized.
Yeah, and it's something that I was kind of acting out. Again, no real guide. Like my guidelines were like I was raised in the SEAL teams. That was sort of my guidelines. And here's a good example. When I first got in the SEAL teams, there was no war going on. So what did a good SEAL do? You know what you did? You went out and drank and got in bar fights. Mm-hmm. That's what a good SEAL did. So you know what I did? Went out and drank, got in bar fights. That's what I'm supposed to do. It took me a while to figure out, no, there's actually something more than that. Like we're actually supposed to be preparing for war. And so now, like you said, I definitely acted things out and sort of was on a decent path. But as I got older and more mature, and to this day, as I can look around and actually overlay the understanding on the way I've carried out my life, it's very helpful to me. And it also helps me explain it to other people that see the path that I'm on and go, they like that path. They would like to join me on that path. And I get guys that, when I was in, I look like a serial killer for all practical purposes. That's the way I come across, right?
Not creepy enough.
There's guys that would, guys that would work for me or guys that would be around me, and they'd see me and they'd kind of latch on to the fact that I was tough and aggressive. And some of those guys, they wouldn't catch the other part, which was that I was politically savvy and I was working and I was maneuvering and I was, figuring things out and talking to my boss in such a way that we could get where we needed to be. And I was doing that whole other side. And so I'd get these guys that would end up not doing as well as they should do because they were just, hey, Jocko's just ultra aggressive and he gets after it. And so that's what I'm going to do and I'll be in the same place. The guys that would do well are the guys that said, oh yeah, Jocko's awesome and he's aggressive and he gets after it. He's also working and he's also maneuvering and he's also massaging the egos of the people around him. So make sure that they get positioned in the right spot where they can go to war in the right way. And so as I've gotten older, I've been able to tell people that more clearly. Like, hey, it's not just about that side of the ultra aggressive. You got to be aggressive. You got to be willing to fight. You got to be willing to kill, and you got to be willing to die. At the same time, you got to be able to temper all those things in such a way that they can be controlled and disciplined.
Well, I also think that that's part of what makes a world peaceful in the final analysis, because if you're around people who are dangerous but disciplined, then everyone watches their step. And that's exactly what should happen. Everybody should watch their step. And if there's no reason for that, then, well, there's no sanction for poor behavior, for example. Like, I mean, if you're going to discipline a child, the child has to be convinced that you're a force that's worthy of paying attention to. You know, I see kids, there's a chapter in my book called Don't Let Your Children Do Anything That Makes You Dislike Them. And I'm pretty happy about this chapter, although I suspect it'll be rather controversial. And, you know, it's predicated first on the observation that many people hurt their children physically and psychologically. You know, because everyone gets sentimental about the relationship between parents and children, but that's especially in relationship to themselves, because they think, well, you know, of course I'm going to be a good parent. It's like, it's not so bloody obvious that you're going to be a good parent, you know. And so, and then what I see happening with people who don't know how to discipline their children is that the children run roughshod over them in their, let's call them hierarchical disputes, because children push for position in hierarchy, and they do that behaviorally to sort of feel out the contours of the social structure. So, you know, your kid will act perfectly fine at home, let's say, at the dinner table, but then you take them to a stranger's dinner table and all of a sudden they act out. And you think, what's up with you, you little monster? And what's up is that they're trying to figure out what the power structure is in the new, they don't know this, of course, but they're acting this out. They're trying to figure out if the same rules apply in this new situation as apply in the old situation. And they can't ask that, and they don't even know that they are rules exactly. They're regularities that they've learned. And so they'll test, and then you have to show them that, yeah, it's the same here. It's the same in this situation. But lots of parents are very uneasy with disciplining their children, partly because they believe that if you give a child infinite freedom, that's best for them, and that constraints are inappropriate, which is really just, well, I don't know what to say about that, except it's so untrue that it's very difficult to think of anything that's more untrue than that. But also the thing is if you let your children take advantage of you, if you have an ounce of spine and an ounce of aggression, which you do, especially if you don't admit it, then you will take revenge on your children. You know, so if they have a temper tantrum in a grocery store and embarrass you, which a child who's canny can do quite effectively, you know, because you wouldn't let them have that pack of crayons or a chocolate bar, and then, you know, you tell yourself it's okay, and that you still, you know, that really didn't make you that angry, and it's okay, but you're fuming inside. And then you go home, and half an hour later, maybe the child is doing some interesting little bit of work, maybe artwork or something, or does something good and comes up for a reward. It's like the probability that you're going to reward that child properly under those circumstances is zero. You're going to take the opportunity to take your revenge. And if you don't know that, then you're not much of a parent. And so part of the trick with kids is that if your child is doing something that makes you dislike them, that you have to figure out how to stop them from doing that and teach them how to do it properly. And you have to talk to your wife to make sure that you're not being too much of a monster, you know, and the same with her. But that discipline is partly what enables you to continue to like your child while you love them. And even more than that, you know, parents talk about fostering self-esteem and fostering creativity and all of that in their kids, and I think that's misbegotten. It's shallow for a variety of reasons. First, it's not that easy to foster creativity because it's rare, and self-esteem is a very badly defined concept, and mostly it's been used for harm, not good. What your job is as a parent is to help your child learn from between 2 years old and say 4 years old how to act in the world so that when people encounter them, people smile and are happy they're around. Because then, you know, I've seen kids who behave badly, and everywhere they go, people wear false smiles. And everywhere they go, people are relieved when they leave. And that means you think about that world from the child's perspective. Everyone's lying, and everyone hates them. That's their world. And then if you have your child, you know, capable of adhering to minimal social requirements, like maybe being able to sit at the table in a civilized manner for an hour, and being grateful for being fed, let's say, and knowing how to share and knowing how to pay attention to adults, and not having that, you know, that kind of terrible cynicism and arrogance that can develop even in a 4-year-old child who's always had his way, then they'll interact with adults in a manner that bring out the best in the adults. And everywhere they go, everyone smiles at them and pats them on the head, maybe even tells them useful and interesting things. And so the whole world opens up for them. And that's all a consequence of you having enough courage to admit to yourself that your child can do things that you don't like, and that you will take it out on them if you don't straighten it out. And people don't like that idea because they think, well, I'd never do anything. You know, I love my child. I'd never do anything to hurt them. It's like, yeah, God, right. You know, you're so asleep if you think that there's almost no hope for you. You have to think, I'm way bigger than this child, and I'm way meaner, and I'm way trickier, and I'm way more unpredictable. And so I better be very careful in my relationships with this child so that the worst of me doesn't come out. And then that gives you enough intelligence to make a disciplinary framework that's minimal and enforce it properly and carefully. And then you can have an unbelievably good relationship with your kids.